Good morning. Today is December 10th. It is 10:06. This is the Budget and Public Employees Committee. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Sanier.
Present.
Vice Chair Browning.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Devotie.
Present.
Chair Aldrich.
Present.
President Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. We have 5 aye votes. I'm sorry, 5 present. We have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam Clerk. With that, we established a quorum. We'll go to item number 3, approval of the minutes. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from December 3rd, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, second by the Alderman from the 9th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Sanier.
Aye.
Vice Chair Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Devotie.
Aye.
Chair Aldrich.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. We have 5 aye votes.
Thank you. With that, we have approved the minutes from Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025. We'll move to the next item, which will be board bills for review, which will be Board Bill 106, introduced by President Green and co-sponsored by Alderman Rasheen Aldrich. President Green, whenever you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, members of the committee. I do have a committee substitute that was emailed out Monday evening. So if we could first kind of make a motion to adopt the committee substitute. So that's what we're off of today.
All right. I'll take a motion to adopt committee substitute to Board Bill 106.
Second.
It's moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th to approve the committee substitute for Board Bill 106. Previous rule. Seeing no objections, we have adopted the committee substitute to Board Bill 106. Madam President, you may.
Great. Well, thank you, members of the committee. I want to start out by saying that Board Bill 106 is more than deciding if we're going to invest in bus rapid transit for St. Louis. It's about making that decision with voters rather than for voters who approved a sales tax expressly for the purposes of expanding light rail in our city. Well, I disagreed with the choice not to pursue federal funding for the Green Line. I do think that if we can't follow through on a commitment we made to voters because federal funding isn't available, then we must work with the public to chart a different course. Those in opposition to this bill and taking it to a vote, including the mayor's office and bi-state, argue that a declaratory judgment is the most expedient way to answer the question of whether the economic development sales tax revenue can be used for BRT. Unilaterally seeking a resolution through the courts rather than working with the public is a violation of their trust. And it signals to leaders that are in our city that we are willing to use the same abuses of power that we've seen in Jefferson City. Whether it's rolling back reproductive health rights, eliminating paid family leave, reversing a ban on puppy mills, gerrymandering our state, we've seen over and over again that Missouri Republicans have misused their authority to overturn what voters have overwhelmingly approved at the ballot box. I do not want to put the Board of Aldermen in a position where we are engaging in those same kind of tactics that this body has been critical of in the past. City leaders, we cannot expect to rebuild trust with residents if we decide to not make decisions with them in the event that we cannot fulfill the commitments that we've made to them. Aside from further eroding public trust in government, failing to put this question to voters at the ballot box puts the city itself at risk. Any taxpayer in the city would have standing to challenge a declaratory judgment, potentially tying up the use of these funds until the matter is resolved in courts. We've seen the Holy Joe Society do this to us multiple times at this point in time. And I think this is too much money and too important to take that risk. Moreover, a negative ruling would require us to take the question back to voters anyway, and only after we've undermined their trust by trying to go around them. That would make this less likely to pass. So in my mind, the right approach is to seek clarity from the voters, not the courts, and for our transit stakeholders to advocate for changing how this tax revenue is used alongside us. I know I will be out there championing changing this tax to allow for BRT, just like I was out there championing it when it was for just Metrolink. So at this point in time, I want to first turn it over to our Deputy Chief of Staff, Christina Grassi, in my office. She was the bill sponsor when this bill was taken to voters initially back in 2017.
Thank you, President Green, and good morning, Chairman Aldridge and members of the committee. Thanks for taking time just to hear this bill this morning. I was asked to present since I was the original sponsor of the economic development sales tax here in the city of St. And just wanted to reiterate that the board bill and its accompanying exhibits were intentionally drafted to instill confidence in city voters who had previous experiences at the ballot when they were asked to raise taxes, and that money did not go where it came from or where it was supposed to go. So I did go back and look at arguments on the floor and my notes from community outreach efforts that were undertaken at neighborhood associations, community events. In the board bill, as I mentioned, in the exhibits, in committee, on the floor, and during those efforts, North-South Metrolink was the only transit that was mentioned. And there were discussions about how we were specific with that language to make sure voters were confident that we would be spending the money in that way. I'm happy to take questions now if you have any, and I'll also be here throughout the hearing on the bill.
Hold those till the end. Hold those to the end, but what we do have on the screen right now is the original ballot language that was sent to voters, where it specifically says North-South Metrolink, and within the text of the bill, it says that 60% of the tax revenue that was collected would have to go to North-South Metrolink. So how do we get voter approval to use funds for bus rapid transit? So what was introduced, we were basically asking if the funds could be used for North-South Metrolink or bus rapid transit, or if we could, and asking for permission to reallocate the funds that have already been collected, which my understanding is close to $100 million. But we recognized from start that that language was insufficient to protect the current tax in the event that it would fail. So I want to bring up Director of Policy, Christina Garamendia, to talk about the work that she did with the City Councilor's Office to draft new ballot language that would ensure that we are protecting these funds in the event that it would fail at the ballot box.
Thank you, President Green. So the board bill that was introduced on the 21st of November, in Board Bill 106, the approach we took to that initial draft was to change as little as possible from the previous, the board bill that introduced the other economic development sales tax. So that's why we said instead of, we used the words reauthorize, we added as or bus rapid transit. We also wanted to make sure we asked voters permission to use previously generated tax revenue for the category transit to be used for bus rapid transit or North-South Metrolink. And so the big question that we got from many of you and residents, and that we had it ourselves, well, what if the ballot fails? So that was a big concern, and we sent over to the City Councilor's Office the questions that many of you gave to us. Is there a way to design the ballot questions so that a no vote results in no change to the tax, and voters are only voting on the part of the tax dealing with transit? And so the answer was yes. And so that is why we submitted that committee substitute today, was to show you that new language. As you can see here, the ballot, what it would look like at the ballot is more of a statement. So the City of St. Louis imposes a sales tax at a rate of 0.5% for economic development purposes, including North-South Metrolink, neighborhood revitalization, workforce development, public safety, and to upgrade the city's infrastructure. Shall the portion of the tax revenue currently allocated to a North-South Metrolink allocated instead for North-South Metrolink or Bus Rapid Transit? And so using some of the similar questions, the format of the question that we had in the first draft, but correcting for addressing the biggest risks that people saw with putting this to the ballot. And so the potential outcomes of this ballot, if voters approve, the funds already collected for North-South Metrolink, which is estimated to be around $96 million, and future tax revenue could be used for Bus Rapid Transit. Funds could be used for North-South Metrolink in the future without having to go back again to voters. But there's no change in the amount of the sales tax, the process by which the sales tax is allocated, or anything related to the non-transit allocations. And if voters don't approve, what would happen is the sales tax will still be collected, very important. The non-transit components of the tax are still allocated to those uses: neighborhood revitalization, workforce development, public safety, and infrastructure. But the funds collected for North-South Metrolink would not be able to be used for Bus Rapid Transit. So.
And to just add one more thing, the reason we kept North-South Metrolink in there as an option rather than just saying Bus Rapid Transit is we don't know what the future of transit is, and we don't know what the future of federal funding looks like. And so while we could, today decide that Bus Rapid Transit is the route that we need to go because of constraints at the federal level, in 10 or 20 or 30 years, those same constraints might not be there. And so it would give us the flexibility to still pursue a light rail system in the future if some of those funding challenges were to change. Okay. We're missing one slide here, but there are, it's on my desk that we can look at. Because the last thing I wanted to bring up, so we are not going to take a vote on this today because there are a few things that I think we still need to build, some consensus around. It's still possible if there's other changes folks would like to see to the ballot language, I'm happy to entertain that. If there are things that we think that, our office and the city councilor's office did not think of, and one of the things that has been brought to me from alders is, does it make sense to even broaden it more, and instead of being specific and saying BRT and Metrolink, North-South Metrolink, does it make sense to just say improve public transit? And I think that's a conversation for this committee to have to help us figure out ultimately what that should look like. And then the election dates. I am not wedded to any election date. We put April 7th in there, knowing that that would be the next available election. And if we chose to do that, then we would have, that means that we would need to pass this relatively quickly. But we could just as easily put it on the August ballot or the November ballot. If it were to go on, if we would put it on the April ballot, it would need to be certified by January 27th in order to make that ballot. The only other thing that would be on that ballot is the earnings tax. And so I think there's a question to ask there of whether these two things should be on the ballot at the same time or not. For August 4th, we would have to certify it through the Board of Aldermen by May 26th. The positive thing with that is I think it gives more time for Metro to engage in some community engagement. Same for November 3rd. And we would have to certify it by August 25th if we were to put it on a November ballot. And then the last piece that still needs to be updated is a more comprehensive description of what BRT is in Exhibit 2. And that's something that I think we can, add to this bill once we get greater clarification from by state on what BRT is anticipated to look like. But that's the end of my presentation. So if there are any questions, happy to take those.
All right, we will go in order of seniority, starting with Alderman Browning.
Thank you. Do something a little unusual here. I noticed Bi-State is here, and I was wondering if we could hear from them real quick before we do committee questioning.
Sure.
If the committee's fine with that? All right. We will go to Bi-State before we go through the committee, and then we also have public comment. I know somebody want to speak on the bill as well. So for the individual that's here from Bi-State, if you can just state your first and last name and the organization you're with.
Yes, thank you for having us, Chair and subcommittee members. My name is Tammy Paris. I am the Chief Financial Officer for Bi-State Development, here to speak this morning. I also have our General Counsel, Greg Linares, and our Lead Engineer, Chris Paylor, to answer any questions that you might have. So we are here this morning really because we were asked to look at legal options for the use of the Prop 1 funds related to a BRT project versus MetroLink. So the first option, and I believe you guys received this information too, is really that we move forward as is, that the BRT is similar enough as a project to MetroLink that it would work for economic development purposes and defining that. But the risk there is the lack of legislative action when we're applying for federal funds. We believe it will be stronger with that legislative action. So option 2 basically talks about that a little more. So what we would be asking is for a vote from the Board of Aldermen or from the Board of Economic Development and Tax to create new legislative action. And in addition to that, we would file a friendly declaratory judgment action, basically for use of the funds. So the combination of both would provide strong support for federal funding. And then the last option is really a revised ballot initiative, as mentioned. And so that is the third option. So Bi-State's position is that we believe option 2 provides adequate mitigation of loans. And we were asking today that we hold Bill 106 just so that we could get more answers and reach out to the public. Doing a project of this nature, it's really critical that we have the details of the project itself and how it will work with our current infrastructure. And then, getting that to the public will help support us when we apply for federal funds. So ultimately, we are really excited to expand transit in the region, and we look forward to working on this project with both the boards and the mayor's office on this going forward. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And so now we will go back to questions from committee, starting with Vice Chair Browning.
Thank you. So I wasn't on the board back when this tax was first put on the ballot back in 2017. I'm curious what the process was when that tax was first proposed. Was there prep work before putting it on the ballot? What was the campaign like to get voter support? Was there feedback from residents? Were there concerns? Noting that it did pass with 60% of the vote, but that means 40% of the people didn't vote for it. So curious, what the argument against it was and who was involved in that campaign, and perhaps Director Ingracia would be, since.
I spoke at many neighborhood associations in favor, but she was the lead, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Alderman, for that question. I think biggest hesitation for voters was the different pools of money. I did go back. There was a pretty big event at Nebula, and St. Louis Public Radio covered that. And so there were discussions about those 4 extra pools of money and where that would be spent. For the most part, people were very excited about the promise of a north-south line as it had been promised for decades and never delivered upon as a way to extend to our neighbors in the north and south from the central corridor. I think 60% of the vote, that would get you a charter amendment. It's not 80%, but it's certainly a high percentage of city voters who are interested in making sure that we fulfilled that promise.
And did it just need 50% or did it need 60?
It was not a charter.
Okay, so
Amendment.
just 50 then. And so yeah, I was aware that the original ballot measure didn't just cover a north-south MetroLink, but it also included money for transportation projects, infrastructure improvements, public safety, and workforce development. It was a package that had something for a lot of people. This time, we would just be adding BRT. That would be the only change.
That's correct.
Okay, and did BRT come up in 2017 during that campaign, to the best of your memory?
It was briefly discussed while we were drafting the bill, and at that time, the Department of Transportation, I think that's the wrong entity where we would be getting matching funds from. I'm forgetting the actual federal agency, indicated that they thought that MetroLink itself would be a much stronger application. And I think that obviously, since we began collecting the taxes, has changed.
So that's a yes. It was just that's the only change this time around. And then I think circling back to the question I had, what entities were involved in like the effort the first time?
There was no like paid outside campaign. It was really just the mayor's office and individual aldermen were interested in putting this forward. There were also some transportation-related nonprofit organizations. I would have to go back in my notes to look for specificity.
Okay. So my understanding was that this bill did come as a surprise to both the mayor's office and Bi-State. In particular, as we just heard from Bi-State, they're currently studying the feasibility and the details of what BRT would mean after, I think it wasn't too long ago that they pivoted away from a north-south MetroLink light rail line. I hear them asking for a hold today. I know you're not asking for a vote, so it sounds like we're gonna get that. Returning to the question that's in front of us, so the question that'll be asked, and I just want to read it aloud so it's very clear. Shall the city of St. Louis reauthorize the sales tax at a rate of 0.5% for economic development purposes, including 1, north-south MetroLink or bus rapid transit, 2, neighborhood revitalization, 3, workforce development, 4, public safety, and 5, to upgrade the city's infrastructure with annual public audits and allow for previous generated tax revenue for transit be used for bus rapid transit or north-south MetroLink.
I want to remind you that's the old language, not the committee substitute language.
Okay, I'm just,
There's the next page on there. We had the original and the updated.
okay, so the change between these two looks like to be, the question becomes, shall the portion of the tax revenue currently allocated to a north-south MetroLink be allocated instead for a north-south MetroLink and or bus rapid transit line with annual public audits and allow for previous generated tax revenue for transit be used for north-south MetroLink and or bus rapid transit? And that was changed to make sure we can utilize the previous funding as well?
Yes, and to protect the funds in the event that it would fail at the ballot box, so the tax would continue.
So is there a campaign that's kind of planned around this for going to whatever election it ends up being? Is there a campaign that is being considered to help promote this and educate the public?
I mean, I know that I will be out there the same way I was in 2017. I going back through my notes, I attended dozens of neighborhood association meetings to talk in favor of this, as did many older people. I know that Citizens for Modern Transit was out there previously, and I've talked to them about this, and they do believe in a vote as well. And so I think that same coalition that worked to pass this the first time around will be there. And we did it without any campaign funding behind us last time around.
I think that's one thing I'm interested in hearing a little more about because, just recent experience, we did the Department of Transportation charter change last year. That came out of the Charter Commission. There was no money budgeted or no campaign planned. And I think that looking back, that was maybe a weakness of the Charter Commission, is that there wasn't enough public engagement and there wasn't enough of a campaign planned to go that final mile and get it actually approved by voters. And so I set up a campaign account. I donated my own money into it. I used it to print materials to promote across the city. And then I did what you talked about, going to, more neighborhood association meetings than I could count. Sometimes running across the entire city in one night just to get to a few different ones. It was a big lift. I think what I'd like to see is a plan for a campaign to make sure that this passes. We do need 50% of people voting in favor, but for those of us who have ridden BRT, I think we know how wonderful it can be. I'm willing to bet, though, that most St. Louisans have not ridden or may not even know what BRT is. Our current bus system isn't utilized by most people, and when we look at putting this on the ballot, do you have a general idea of how many people might be in favor of replacing trains with buses?
I don't know of any polling at this time. I will say that as far as the charter amendments when my supporting PAC also raised money and did a citywide mailer and texts and some phone calls to support that campaign as well. So there was a more robust campaign around that. And if you've noticed, that's something that as president of the board, I've done for every initiative that we've taken to the ballot. I've taken the initiative to raise that money to make sure that we have that support there. That has not historically been what the board does, but I think it's a necessary component. And I think that goes to election date. Doing an August or November election date may give more time for that public engagement to take place, and that may be what we want to do because of that. And so I'm kind of indifferent to what date that ends up being. What I think has to happen, though, is this needs to go to a vote, regardless of what date it is on, because I do not want to put the Board of Aldermen in a position where we are undermining public trust and undermining what voters have previously asked us to do.
And I don't disagree with the idea of putting it to a vote. I think that is the right thing to do. I think that my main concern is that there is an unfamiliarity with the public with BRT. I mean, even the name is kind of weird, like Bus
Yes.
Rapid Transit. And again, like if you've ridden it, it's better than buses on a normal bus, I think, in that it's faster, it's more predictable, it gets you across the entire city a lot faster, it has dedicated lanes usually, there's a lot of details that go into it, and that's where I would want to make sure people are aware of that, not just thinking we're going to do a normal metro bus that runs late or sometimes just doesn't come at all. The struggles that our current bus system has, and I know we're working hard to improve that. But we need to, as you said, rebuild trust with residents, and so part of that is making sure we have that vote. So the language of the bill has shifted with this committee substitute, and I think that's a good move. I think that a letter we received from, I want to say, a lot of residents that identify themselves as urbanists, and they communicated three main asks. One of them was that language change.
Yes.
So I think that's covered. So I'm going to focus on the other two asks of theirs, which were to move this to the November ballot. And it sounds like you're amenable to
Fine
that.
with that, yes.
That would give us time to pitch this to the voters. I don't think there's really urgency to put this on the April ballot, and I don't think there's enough time. At least I don't know that I'm going to be able to get it out there enough between now and April. And then the other thing was to clarify what bus rapid transit is. And that's part of the weakness of like a ballot question, is that you can't like put a diagram with something to say, here's what it's like, or, here's how it would work. You just kind of have to ask the question. So we need time to get that out. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of BRT. I think it's a wonderful solution. I actually would prefer it because I think it's cheaper per mile and we would be able to get more done with it. I was a little surprised, and the reason I haven't added myself as a co-sponsor to this quite yet is just I was a little surprised by the path chosen here. I would want two things if this were to go to the ballot. One, for it to pass, and the other for the language to be exactly right so that we don't have to go back and do this again.
Yeah.
I feel like if it fails at the ballot, that could also invalidate the bi-state effort to get a court ruling as well, because then the voters would have definitively said no, and that would really complicate our ability to go forward. There was a lot of discussion for years. I was just an official back when this was originally done, so I'm trying to remember like what I perceived as a member of the public. And I remember there being a lot of discussion about a North-South Metrolink well before we got to that point where we were voting on it. So there was like a lot of excitement built up, and it was finally the first proposal we saw in a long time to actually get something like that done. Then it was walked forward, and it had a lot of, I don't want to call it ballot candy, but it was like a lot for everyone, right? The tax went to different things. This doesn't feel like it has the same run up, and so I don't know if it'll have the same support from as many partners, and again, not as many people familiar with BRT. I would feel a lot more comfortable if this was on the November ballot. I would also want to see a plan to bring the public up to speed. I think we should walk this forward with our partners. BRT could be a game changer for St. Louis, but if this doesn't pass, then it may never leave the station. So Thank you again. I do appreciate this bill being brought forward. I hope we can work together with our partners going forward to make sure that this does get to a place where we can ensure its passage.
I completely agree, and I have said this to Bi-State and to the mayor's office that I would love to work in collaboration with them to get this to a vote. Just don't want to put the board in a position where we're acting against what voters asked us to do. But I think Director Ingracia had a point to.
Thanks, President Green. Just a quick addition to that conversation about the different pools of money. Those were specifically created to support North-South Metrolink, and so they should still be utilized to support BRT as well. It wasn't just thrown in there to make it attractive to more people. It was put in there specifically as a support for the line.
Alderwoman Tanya.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I first just want to thank President Green and Bi-State and all the folks who have been involved in these conversations. I remember when we started talking about as a city, just this whole tax conversation, even making public transit a public conversation. I think that's to be celebrated anytime that happens. So thank you all for y'all's leadership. I think a lot of my concerns and thoughts are similar to that of the alderman from the 9th. I know that bus rapid transit is something, I feel like it was a lot of talk as soon as we knew the change that happened in the presidential race, that we knew that, funding just wouldn't be there at the federal level for the light rail project. And I feel like I know one of my community's top concerns is absolutely public transit and making it as robust and accessible as possible. And so I would just share his concerns as far as making sure that we have the time to properly engage them and talk to them. I know, like, to me, I'm curious because I have some residents that are like messaging me but are not testifying or are not at the committee. And so I want them, I'm telling them personally, but I also want them to hear me just on the record to say, like, it's really important that you all participate in these conversations. And if there's a particular reason why you're not coming forward or, some specific questions you have, of course, like, you can send them to me and you can ask them for me, but this has to be a robust public conversation, and so we need the public to participate. But I think for them, maybe I think they don't want to come forward and do anything publicly that looks like they're opposed, but they just have a lot more questions about the technicalities of how it would work. I think they're absolutely open to BRT, but they're just not sure how it would work, haven't had a chance to have those conversations, and so maybe are like, well, let me just go to her and bring my concerns to her because I don't want to come out against and be opposed. So I just think, just echoes Alderman Brown's points about the need to just do a thorough campaign and educational conversation. One of the things that caught my eye, and this might be for Director Ingracia, is you said that it was shared that the federal agency said that the light rail would be a stronger application. Could you elaborate more on that?
Good morning, Alderwoman.
Good morning.
I just know that it was something that was discussed, and when I went back and looked at my notes from that legislation, it's listed in there. I remember we had several telephone calls with at least Noel Pfeffer, who was in the mayor's office at that time, and myself. I think it's the Federal Transportation administration. Yes, so like I said, it was pretty informal. There was not a lot of serious conversation about moving T forward because the thought at that time was that it made more sense to do an actual line. And there was also conversation in the community, especially deeper north and south, that people trusted light rail more because it's permanent, and so it couldn't be taken away from them.
Okay. And then I guess this could be a question for all of us, honestly, board, by everyone in the room. But in terms of community engagement, I'll say one of the concerns, I definitely think April is much too soon for this to go on the ballot. I don't think that gives us enough time to have the conversations, and I think there are other things that would be on the April ballot that I wouldn't want to get conflated with this. And I think especially, you know, just to be frank, I think there is a lot of, especially sort of in North City, I think there's going to have to be a deep engagement and education process. I know when it came to the Greenway Metro, there were some community groups in some neighborhoods that were opposed to the project. I'm actively still talking to my own grandmother and trying to get her on board with public transit and talking to her about what it looks like when everybody gets it. And, you know, unfortunately, people look at cars as that's my sign of economic mobility, and they don't necessarily understand because of what public transit has looked like in the history of the city, like what it is. So I am looking forward to my grandma who's watching, to us going to Chicago and me putting her, like, seeing, look at what buses and trains and all these things can look like when it works. But to that end, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts around what that community engagement and what that campaign process can look like? You know, how would you Bi-State or Metro's role in that? How can alders help? Just any thoughts that we can share with the public in terms of how we envision the community engagement portion to go with this effort?
Yeah. So Bi-State at the moment does have a community engagement process up that was started back in September for BRT. And that process is supposed to go 12 to 15 months. And so putting it on a November ballot, I think would give a lot of time for that public kind of visioning process to take place. And then, you know, it's up to us as alder people too, and supporting community groups to get out there and talk to the neighborhood associations and educate them like we have in the past. So I think some of that public engagement process is already planned out. It's already Bi-State is in process doing, and I think that there are ways that the board can plug into that. The biggest question for me, and what I don't want to have happen, and the reason I went ahead and filed this bill, is I do not want Bi-State in the mayor's office to do an end round around the board, go to a judge, tell us that we have to allocate these funds without taking it to a public vote, because that puts us in a position that I don't want us to be in, especially without having a public conversation about the repercussions of that kind of decision.
Thank you. I think this question might be more so for Metro or Bi-State, but, you know, I just have to be fully honest that I think there's a lot of lack right now in the busing systems that we have. And so a lot of the people who I know that take bus, and I don't use the bus often, but I have, I mean, if you work in Bi-State, you know the schedules are not met. I know even our most busy bus line on Grand has had lines moved to meet needs in other places. And so I'm really curious about, you know, if I'm a resident, you're asking me to vote for this, and I use the bus, my question would be, how can I trust that this is going to be a serious priority and commitment, and that the schedules are going to run, and it's going to be as rapid as it's claiming when the current services in place have lack for, that's probably as politically tacked as I can say. And so I'm curious to hear from someone from Bi-State about just you all's level of like serious commitment and prioritization of that, and how would we go about, you know, addressing those concerns with the public and making sure that they can trust that this will be reliable and efficient, and it will be the bus rapid transit that we're claiming that it will be.
Yes, so Bus Rapid Transit actually has a dedicated line, or dedicated lane, I apologize, that will help with, you know, I think as it was mentioned that it will help with transit. It's much faster, more expedient. I think you're asking me about current operations, and we, so I just wanted to say that to start. But for current operations, we continue to work. We do have our operators. We have our full operator team now, and we are working on frequencies and different things like that to help with bus. Our chief operating officer isn't here this morning, but he could speak to that more clearly, and we can do that.
So do you, for bus rapid transit, there would be drivers specifically assigned to these routes that you all would not move, no matter what else you were prioritizing?
We would have to look at that as what the service would be, but it would service with bus rapid transit. So we'd have to look at a budget for that and what that looks like going forward too.
I just think that has to be a part of this conversation. I don't want us to do like false promises to the public. And again, I think if we're gonna increase, to me, the success of this is gonna be on ridership. And we gotta convince people who don't have cars that this is more effective and more efficient for you. But also, if I'm currently taking the bus in the city of St. Louis, I would be like, again, where is the trust there? And so I would be really curious about specific logistical moves and specific staffing decisions that will ensure that this will run that way. And I also think it should be a commitment, that those staff won't be moved to meet other service lines. I know that that's a practice, and I understand why that happens logistically, what's in place. But for me, a lot of my questions as we continue to discuss this effort will be around our ability to really deliver bus rapid transit. What I don't want to is do this whole campaign, convince voters that we can do this, and then do it and we do it wrong, and now people are not open to it. And I think that's really important because to me, one of the most interesting things about bus rapid transit, I have some constituents who definitely are a little hesitant because they don't like pivoting away from the metro. And I think one of the best selling points that we have going is like, listen, if you do bus rapid transit, this could kind of actually create the lines that you could then come back and put the light rail in. I haven't heard you all speak to that, so I think like maybe that is something worth mentioning, that the routes for BRT, you just don't have to put the light rail infrastructure in, but it could be very similar to what the other things are. But I have a real fear that if we do it and we do it wrong, then we will close off voters' mindsets to just trusting that and do public transit, effectively and efficiently. So I really would like to see some very specific logistics and staffing commitments from you all that, yes, you have our word and you have our serious commitment that we're going to prioritize this. I don't want people to think this is just like a consolation prize because we're not doing light rail. I want them to see like, no, we're serious, we're going to invest in it. And I think those logistics and staffing things have to be there before it's in place.
So it would be an expansion in service. So it would be more operations, right? So we would not move current operators to this. We always look at our total service of what we're providing, but we wouldn't be taking operators from our current routes and moving them, here so that we didn't provide that service. This is an expansion in service by doing this. So we would look at what the total operating expenses are for that, but it would be separate. So it wouldn't be taking away from our current service, it would be adding to.
If you're a resident user, I think if what's in place does not work, you're going to be very hesitant to add. You're going to be very hesitant if what's in place is not working. You're going to be very hesitant to add services and trust those services. So that's why I'm saying that if we are going to expand these services, we need to have some commitments and things that we can show legitimately of like, we really are going to make sure this is bus rapid transit. And I know like we're very early in this conversation. It's our first public meeting. I don't expect all the answers here, but I think that's really important to have a part of this conversation because again, this city, we have not done public transit right. And the more we do things, if we do them and they don't work, we turn people off and we get their distrust and they're less open to it. And especially in such a car-focused city, if it's not efficient, people will just keep driving their cars. We won't get ridership. The financial model won't work out. So, I just think as we move forward, there has to be, a conversation. I just wanted to put it on record here so you all could know every time we have this conversation, I will be following up to see where we are in that.
I appreciate that, and we will follow up with additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Saunier, I wasn't clear from your remarks, though. Do you support this going to a vote?
Do I
Support it going to a vote?
I don't have any problem with this going to a vote. Like I said, I just think that it's really important that we do the proper time to have a campaign, that we do the proper time to have an education, and that when we put this to a vote of the people, that we have the logistics and staffing to show that we actually are in position to do it, as opposed to a situation where we put something in front of voters and we're kind of making them a promise, and then what we do is very subpar and it doesn't align at all with what we asked voters to support. So I support a vote, but I want to see some logistics and some staffing and some serious commitments that we actually will have a bus rapid transit line, not that we'll put something in place and then schedules are off and it's not done and it's not relatable. So I support this vote, but I just think as leaders, we have a responsibility to make sure that those things are in place and what we're asking people to vote for, they will actually.
Thank you for that clarity.
Alderman Devoti.
I have a couple of comments and then I do have a question.
Sure.
I hate to, well, first of all, thank you for bringing this
Your
bill.
mic on.
Thank you for bringing this bill. I think what it does, if not for anything else, is it starts the conversation on this side of the second floor. So that is very much appreciated. I do hate, however, to be the picky lawyer, but
Please be the picky lawyer.
but-
That's why we love you.
yeah, well, sometimes, right? Sometimes. I think there are two. I think there are two separate issues here. I think issue number one that we've glossed over a bit today is whether the language from the April 2017 proposition does require this submission to the people. When I read it, and thank you very much for also putting it under our nose today, I disagree with you. I don't think it does. The language that is used talks, well, it includes the word including, and then it identifies 5 ways in which the funds collected for the percent of economic development may be used. I just disagree with that. I think that is, I just don't think that we should tell the public that this is required under the language passed in 17. I just think that's not accurate. Now, I think that begs a second question, which I do tend to agree with you, and that is whether good, sound public policy suggests whether this should be submitted back to the people. So I know that's a fine line. That's me picking. But I think that's important as we go forward to not say we must, but rather phrase the question to the public in terms of, as your public stewards, we have collected, I think, $96 million, but the testimony is what is sitting in an account. We think that you should have a say with that. And I know I'm splitting hairs, but I think it's important to phrase the presentation in those terms. That's me. The second thing, and this is my comment leading into a question.
Right.
Thank you for your patience. Is during your presentation, Madam President, you mentioned that one of the unknowns is we simply don't know what the future will look like. And we're kind of dealing with the question that the voters were presented, 8 years ago, plus 8 years ago, nearly. And now we're looking at the consequences of how things in D.C., how things in Washington can change. Whether we like it or not, the Trump administration will someday be moved on. There will be another administration in D.C. I think we mentioned the FTA, the Federal Transportation Administration? Federal Transit Administration. I think, being optimistic, we would all hope that public policy coming from the FTA will someday change when this administration sunsets. I guess my question then is, when I look at the proposed ballot language, we talk in terms of, shall the portion of tax revenue currently allocated instead be allocated for 2 items, north-south expansion and/or bus rapid transit. Beyond what my colleagues have said and asked questions about BRT, why hem ourselves in like that? Yeah. As we sit here today in December of 2025, I think we could probably be creative and we can brainstorm about what the future will hold or may hold. But if we do agree that this is a good question to submit to the voters, why hem ourselves in? Why hem the city of St. Louis in the next generation, 10 years down the road, 2 generations down the road, to simply north-south Metrolink or bus rapid transit? Yeah. I mean, God knows what might be available in another 5 or 10 years. What's your thought there?
I completely agree with you. And we went kind of back and forth in drafting this of whether we should be specific or more broad and say something like improving public transit access and availability, something that leaves the door open to multiple forms of public transit. And something like that as well might actually help some of the qualms around, well, what is BRT? I've never heard this term before. If we were to make it more broad, and then the bill text could back that up by, listing out kind of acceptable types of, public transit that we're thinking of today, knowing that it may look very different in 20 or 30 years, and there's not a sunset on this. And so that's part of the conversation that I wanted to get going here, is that we can, it doesn't, I'm not married to this ballot language either, and I think it's really a decision for this board of whether we want to, keep it more specific or widening it to make it more all-encompassing.
I know when the announcement originally came from the mayor's office about BRT, well, and I'm not as well-traveled as Alderman Browning. I have never participated or rode a BRT. I got to admit, there's
Change that.
yeah, but there's a lot of folks in the Fifth Ward that said to me, Matt, what the heck is this thing?
Yeah.
I just, as is hemmed into something that the mayor's office has said, for fiscal reasons, isn't now plausible. North-South Metrolink expansion. And then something with at least the majority of the folks in my ward have no idea what it is. I think it's a pretty heavy lift. And I am sure that these guys will run their campaign and they will educate. But there's a lot of education to do, which leads me to my last comment, which you probably know where I'm coming. I think April is way too soon.
Okay.
Way too soon. I have concerns about the way this language is hemmed in. I have concerns with respect to education. I have concerns about whether, well, I don't believe this is mandated, but I think that this question of does policy direct it, I think is one that we should hash out more than just in this committee. That's my thoughts. So I know we're holding on this today, but for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and if I could respond kind of to your first point. Well, it's possible that we go to a judge and a judge says, yes, you have the ability to allocate these funds without going back to voters. To me, it comes down to can versus should. And, we see at the state level that technically Republicans have had the authority to repeal the puppy mill ban, to repeal paid, sick leave. Does that mean that they should have? I think most of us would agree, no. And that's the type of, ultimately, that is where I'm trying to prohibit us from going, because I don't want this body that has routinely passed resolutions condemning some of the actions at the state level to then turn around and engage in very similar actions.
I think, to be clear, you and I are coming at this from the same way.
Yeah.
I'm picking at you with respect to language.
Yeah, okay.
I do think that sound aldermanic policy is to put this question before the voters. So you and I do agree about that, without a doubt. I have qualms with the messaging, is my point.
Okay.
Anyway.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my questions are more for bi-state, if we could start there. Because I just wanted to get some clarity on, I read the memo. Can we have
They're standing at the mic, Alderwoman. They're waiting on you.
Okay. That just disappeared me. Thank you. Hi, thank you for being here, and thank you for the memo you sent. And I know these are big conversations, and I also appreciate my colleagues' questions. Can you just tell me, just looking at the memo, it looks like well, when do you think that you will all be able to have that the legal review and some more definitive answers for the board?
So that was after legal review, those 3 options. That.
Okay, but it sounded like there was some questions then in how to move forward.
I'm going to have Greg Linares, our general counsel, speak. Hold on one second.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Alderwoman.
Could you state your first and last name?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm Greg Linares, Chief Legal Counsel by State Development. Alderwoman Velasquez, if you don't mind restating your question so I can see if I can help.
Well, I just wanted to get some clarity. I think it sounded like, I read the memo, obviously you all discussed it earlier. It sounded like there is some question about when you all kind of reach a final decision on your full position. Is that, am I not, is that correct?
A big piece of our ask is really related to what Ms. Paris said earlier, that we are asking for time to hold, to have further discussion related to some of the issues that Alderman Devotie was raising about language. There also has to be a significant community engagement piece. So that's really not as much a legal question as a policy question. I think there's a lot of time that has to go into that, and I'll let Ms. Paris talk about that if she wants.
Yeah, so that's why we were asking for some time to actually go to the public, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood the question, but we were asking for to really look at that and talk with that and figure out the details of it.
Okay, because I'm just going to be frank here. It seems like reading it that, I mean, option 2 is what Bi-State really prefers, which is, I mean, it could involve a community engagement requirement, but is not sending it back to the ballot. So that's why I'm kind of asking about your timeline as an organization and how you're seeing it moving forward.
So we are saying 12 to 15 months on that.
12 to 15 months on the community engagement piece,
And
with or without it going to the ballot.
so I'm sorry, I'm bringing the whole team on board now. So Chris is going to talk about
It's
community
okay, it's a multi-layered
engagement.
question, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chris Paler. I'm the Vice President of Capital Programs for Bi-State. We've started up on the BRT phase of the project and scoping it and developing what's called the alternatives analysis to look at the corridor. And our community engagement effort is really going to start in earnest in January and February. We've already gone through almost 60 meetings during the light rail phase. I would suspect a similar community engagement pretty much over the entirety of 2026.
So you're talking 12 to 15 months for community engagement with or, and that timeline is not really even considering whether it goes to the ballot or not. It's just if it's presenting the idea to the public. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. That's just for the execution of the project, going through the normal design development, engaging the community throughout that process. It's independent, specifically of whatever direction the ballot does or doesn't go.
So we also need to, I just want to, I think, clarify the public too. So this is going to happen whether or not, regardless of options 1 through 3. So is that correct?
Yes. Again, that's just the execution of the project itself, going through the design process, independent of any election.
Even if we don't necessarily know or agree on the funding for the project?
That's correct.
Okay. I think thank you. I think that's all I have for Bi-State. I just want to say, I mean, for Madam President and my colleagues, I agree with a lot of this conversation. Obviously, I'm not an attorney like Alderman Devotie, but I always appreciate his maybe in the weeds, but not for the lawyers in town questions. And I do think it's one thing that I just want to say is, you know, we've talked about campaigns, making sure that they're aligned, and then making sure that people know what's happening. Obviously, we're kind of in a strange spot as electeds pushing things on the ballot. We've all had charter amendments that we've had to make, and there's a political versus an elected line that we have to watch out for. But what I do think that says, is that robust public education and/or campaign requires partners. And so, you know, for Bi-State, for all of the different organizations in the region that are committed to our region's economic development, the combined public engagement or civic engagement and public awareness, we need partners to do that. It obviously can't just be an alderman legally and, you know, capacity wise. But I think that's, you know, I think I heard everybody here say that was important. I agree it's important because what is BRT if you don't know? But I think that just means more, that requires partnership from all the different organizations who are, you know, working toward better transportation in our region. That's all I have for you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderwoman. So first, I want to thank the president for bringing, and her staff for bringing this bill forward. I am signed on as a co-sponsor because, however it shakes out, I do believe that this is something that needs to go back to the vote of the people. This is something that I think originally, the way the original language read, it is very clear that these funds are for the North-South Metro expansion. But with that, I will say, I think the bringing of this bill has opened up a lot of conversations outside of legislation, even to some of the things that Alderwoman Sanye brought up of just what does public transportation, and Alderman Devoti, public transportation looks like in the future for the city of St. Louis, and that even goes to staffing. We have, seen several bus lines be cut. In the past, we have seen, and from my constituents, I use it, buses that do not come at an adequate time already as it is. And to be honest, I also agree, I think August is too early, but also of the mindset potentially is November too early, because I think there's deeper conversations around not just bus rapid transit. I think there's conversation of what public transit looks like. I think there's conversations that need to be had. If we do, what does that look like to make sure that it's being done efficiently? And that, as Alderwoman Sanye said, that we're not just rushing something and saying, now we're going to do these rapid buses and they're going to be able to pick you up. One of my concerns is, I'm glad that we are being very focused on residents and pedestrians and understanding that the city is not just people who drive cars. So that has mean we have shortened lanes. We have made our main arterial roads a lot smaller, if it's Grand, if it's kind of like Natural Bridge. But that brings me to a point of, as we talk about bringing these express lanes, I haven't rode a BRT, but I was in New York City a few weeks ago and I see they have a dedicated bus lane. My concern is that we are constantly making our streets smaller. So as I was talking with Bi-State, I know one of the routes for this BRT is continue it down Natural Bridge up Jefferson. Right now, you look down Natural Bridge, it's a one lane, and that was done and through construction with Alders and MoDOT. And I'm assuming we would tear up all that work that was done to create these express lanes. Same thing with Jefferson, of how we continue to make lanes smaller, which I think when you talk about bus rapid transit, I think becomes a problem to ensuring that we have those buses to be able to run on these lanes that we are constantly reducing and making smaller. So all this infrastructure that we're doing, who knows, Market's a main street, Grand's a main street, and a lot of those streets in the near future will be reduced to one lanes. What does that conversation look like with a bus rapid transit? I also agree that there needs to be more conversation in the community about this, which, again, I'm glad that this bill is forward. I think it's forcing the question to have that. But at the same time, on the side of, from the resident side, I could tell you what buses are not already super excited the way that they run now. And I get that bus rapid transit can make that happen a little sooner, but I think outside of a campaign to educate, there's going to have to be a lot of trust rebuilding between Bi-State, between community, and also between the government body that had put something in front of residents in the past, and we are again. I do agree with the alderman from the 5th, and I know that's one of the suggestions that the president is open to, is not getting locked in on metro expansion or bus line. I mean, the reason that we're now having conversations of changing it is because we locked ourselves in on the North-South Metro expansion, and I would hate if we say it's North-South Metro expansion or rapid busing, and then we figure out, a few years down the line that, or a few months after they do another study on the engineering, that actually maybe bus rapid transit may not work for certain areas. So I do appreciate that we are having this conversation, and I think I'm glad you actually brought this bill forward, because I think, it sounds like from the comments that the Alderwoman from the 6th said, that Metro has 3 opinions, and they are leaning to one, opinion number 2, and if probably not for a public setting, that they were going to move forward with an opinion without making sure that the community or this political body was part of that process. So I'm glad that now lines of communication between the Board of Aldermen, the President's office, the Mayor's office, and Metro is open, but you know, and I want to make sure that we move forward in a unified manner. This is not a time to like point fingers. We just need to get this right because we know that one of the systems that were in place is not going to happen now. So now that everybody's forward, but I believe it should go back to the vote of the people. I don't think it should go in front of a judge to decide. I think the people decided the first time. I think they should decide every time since we've been collecting their tax dollars on this. That's my comment. I don't know if you want to.
Mr. Chairman, would it be all right if I take my seat for a minute? Because I do have a question for Bi-State.
Yes, I think the Alderman from the 7th, you have a question?
I don't have a question, just a comment. I just want to make sure I put this on record, that I'm really glad that this did become a conversation before you all put this in front of a judge for an opinion. I think partnership is really important, and I hope you all look at the Board of Aldermen, each of us as partners, not just the mayor, not just even President Board of Aldermen, but each alder, because when these things happen, we get flooded with questions from community, and had that happen and went in front of a judge, I can promise you I would have gotten blown up via phone call, via email, all sorts of residents questions, and all I would have been in position to say is like, hey, no one talked to me about this. I didn't even know this going to judge. So I just want to make sure that I do go on record and say, like, I think that's an error on you all's part, and I hope it doesn't repeat in the future, and I hope you treat each member of this body, whenever we're making big decisions like this, that you, I know we have a meeting set up, and I look forward to talking to you all, but just make sure in the future that you don't think of engaging government, that the only person you need to talk to is the mayor or even the president of the body or the comptroller, but that each member of this legislative body is included in those conversations before public decisions and public moves are made, so that we're in position to make sure we can educate our communities, inform them, and bring them along with us, and so that our input are a part of these decisions as well.
Yes, ma'am. Our councilwoman, we were in the process of just looking at options. We were not moving forward at all. The main reason this communication is happening is because of the bill that was filed. So we were in the moment of just really looking at the different options that we have funding. So we really do want to work in collaboration with everyone here, the mayor's office, and anybody that needs to be involved to do this right, because the biggest thing is that we just get a project working.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Madam President, I will let you ask questions. I'll just say in the future, I've been down here for a short period. I've not seen someone ask questions on their bill to somebody who's there. So just like in the future, so that it's not like a back and forth. If whatever questions you may just have in the future, if you probably can ask those questions ahead of time, so that it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't want this to be looked at as you asking questions on your own bill with people you could have asked questions ahead of time.
I mean, I am a member of the committee, and historically we've been able to ask questions of witnesses. And I just have a very quick question. You know, when every conversation that I had with Bi-State up until September had been, this needed to go to a public vote. And then that changed a few weeks before, or a week before this bill was filed. And I was very much approached under we want to do number 2, and where we are committed to number 2 without having had a public discussion or a discussion with this body. And so my request today, we are holding this bill because the intention was to get the conversation started. But my request that I want to make on record is that you not go and seek a declaratory judgment and ask the mayor's office to seek a declaratory judgment until there is consensus built with this body.
Yes, we will be working in collaboration going forward, and that was the intention. And as far as I know, that was always our intention, is to work in collaboration with all the groups involved.
Okay, great, thank you. That's it.
All right, before we go to public comment, really quick, Alderwoman Velasquez?
I heard that.
Oh, no, you're totally fine.
I just had a clarifying question for by state, because I didn't quite answer the president's question on whether they would hold on seeking a declaratory judgment in court or not.
So my knowledge, and Greg, we have no movement of that currently.
It's just discussion. Those are just options.
Right, we were just giving the options of what we thought were needed to consider for using the funding for BRT.
Okay, no, thank you, appreciate it. I'll just echo my colleagues in saying, I mean, we want to be partners. And I know that you are in the middle of conversation, or that I have something on the schedule with by state, I believe tomorrow. So we want to be, but also that's a good showing of partnership and willing to discuss things before making decisions, especially in the courts. So that's all I have, Chairman. Thank you.
No, you're totally fine. And before we go to public comment, there's one more person that I wanted to be part of this conversation. If Mr. Ogilvie can come up as kind of the transportation guru of the city of St. Louis and working with everybody on this.
Yeah, thank you. This is probably a very awkward time to come up because I got pulled away and I missed what was discussed. So I just apologize in advance. And you may have already covered all these topics, but thanks, Mr. Gunther. My name is Scott Ogilvie. I work for the city's Planning and Urban Design Agency. My comments here are just as a staff person who's worked on the project across 3 mayoral administrations. They're, I think, germane to the topic, but they're not necessarily directed at towards the bill itself. I think just maybe 2 things to emphasize, which might have been covered, is in the last several years, I think a very qualified team made every effort to make light rail in this corridor work. National experts are on the team. A lot of money was invested far beyond just planning into real engineering, and that really uncovered a lot of constraints and got very specific on the actual costs of the project, which I think led directly to this decision to seriously consider other modes of public transit in this corridor. And I think we just shouldn't lose sight of all the really quality work over the last 2 to 3 years that went into engineering and trying to get a viable light rail project in the Green Line corridor. Secondly, you may have already discussed in detail defining BRT. Again, I don't know because I was out of the room, but 2026 is going to be all about defining what a gold standard premium level BRT project can be in St. Louis, informing the public about what BRT looks like, setting an ambitious vision, and informing the public about elements of a potential BRT project that can enhance service even beyond what light rail could have in this corridor, including extending farther down Natural Bridge to more neighborhoods in North St. Louis to serve more residents and a larger population. So those would have been my comments earlier. Hopefully they're not totally pointless, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from the committee to Mr. Ogilvie? I will say one thought comment as we continue, as you just mentioned, Natural Bridge. I think maybe he was out of the room or in the room. So that part of Natural Bridge is in the 14th. And I think as you're aware, I think I brought this up on the call with you in Bi-State, there's already a 1 lane going down Natural Bridge. I don't know if that was in collaboration with MoDOT, because I know that's MoDOT's street and it's kind of weird. But as we look at some of these streets that are already 1 lane and try to do this, it would be good to collaborate with the community. I don't like necessarily the infrastructure down Natural Bridge, but I do know it has reduced a lot. And I know one of the things that was said is, rip out the middle lane and put a bus down the middle. I don't know how safe that would be, but we should just be cautious down these streets that we're already turning to 1 lanes and investing money in for infrastructure to do so, just then to turn around to rip it up to do something different.
Yeah, that was a MoDOT-led project. It cost several $1 million, but even the vision for that project, which I think was completed 3 or 4 years ago, was, that large median space, they didn't build it to the highest level because they understood that in the future it might be removed for, a dedicated transit way. At the time, they were thinking light rail. But I think the question is a great question because that's the type of thing we're going to be investigating in 2026. And the vision for BRT to provide really high quality, frequent service, reliable service, it's going to be for primarily, dedicated bus lanes or a dedicated transit way. And so there's the potential with the lower per mile cost of BRT generally to make a lot of just infrastructure upgrades in the corridor so that the whole corridor looks and performs really well and, has a new look and feel compared to, the infrastructure level today, which is certainly not perfect.
Gotcha. I'm glad you brought up that 2026, and that goes, and maybe you was out of the room again, goes back putting this on the ballot in November 2026. So I think of community engagement. I think that's going to take a nice 9-month just, maybe I'm overdoing it, but it's going to take a lot of time to do the community engagement than just to turn around and put it on the ballot. I think November may be even too soon as things are going to be looked at in 2026, but it's just a comment, so.
I'm just here to talk about the project.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Ogilvie.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, we'll go to public comment. If you are in the room and you would like to speak, please, there's a sign-up sheet up front if you have not signed up already. And for folks that are online that would like to speak, just raise your hand and you'll be moved over. But everybody that would like to speak, if you can raise your right hand in the room and also online. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All righty, Madam Clerk, you may proceed with the first person in the room, and then we'll go online.
Ms. Liz Kramer from Ward 7. In support?
Hello, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you to President Green for bringing this bill forward. My name is Liz Kramer. I'm a resident of the 3500 block of Humphrey in the 7th Ward, and I'm also here today as Miss Metrolink, the unofficial self-appointed pageant winner of public transportation. And I'm here to say Miss Metrolink is a big fan of BRT. We need BRT. We need to make sure it happens, and we need to make sure that these funds can be used for high quality, as Mr. Ogilvie just said, gold standard premium transit in St. Louis, which is not what we have right now. So I am fully in support of bringing this back to the public. We need the public's buy-in. We need not just people who use the bus, but people who drive cars, people who are visiting our city to believe that we can have transit, live in an urban community where we use that to go places. So you've discussed many of the things that are important to me today. I want to emphasize that I think it's really important we push this back so there is time for community engagement, whether that's November or that's later. I know there are many members of the public who are enthusiastic to tell why BRT is so great. I also want to make sure that the language that makes it to the ballot actually describes what it is, because as much as we want to do a lot of great community engagement, there's a lot of people who show up to vote who have never heard of this before. So emphasizing that BRT is high quality transit. And then the third issue that the Alderwoman from the 5th brought up, I think it is important to make sure we don't have to come back and do this again in 2 years. Let's make sure we can use these funds long term to support transit that builds our economic prosperity, our access to jobs. And if that means expanding what this tax can be used for and making sure we are clear, we are not at legal risk, we aren't holding up any of these funds, that is where we need to go. And finally, I want to say I'm really appreciative for the substitute that came in today. It's really important that we maintain that additional 40%. Those funds are going to good work in the city of St. Louis right now, and at a time when we are so at risk for cut federal funding, we need to make sure we can make use of funds that are really supporting keeping us the city that we want to be. Thanks.
Thank you. I forgot to mention everyone has 3 minutes, but you was under that, Miss Metrolink Transit. All right, we'll go to the person online.
I believe his name is Josiah.
All right, Mr. Josiah, if you could just say your first and last name, the ward you reside in, and you have 3 minutes, and you can proceed.
All right, my first name Josiah, last name Zimmer. I live in Ward 7, ironically also in the 3500 block of Humphrey. I don't have a little plastic crown, but you can call me Mr. Metrolink. I only have 2 minutes, so I'll keep it short. I want to first address you, Mr. Rasheen, because you were talking about how we're reducing lanes on arterials, and you said that's great, but now you're concerned about drivers. So why not just use the 1 lane in each direction left to make it bus only? I mean, I don't know why you're thinking so car-centric, especially coming from the north side. Driving is a privilege, not a right. And we should prioritize non-drivers since we're a city. And Ms. Green, you said you're seeking clarity from the residents. Let me be crystal clear. This is not okay. This is unacceptable. We voted for a Metrolink line, and you are undermining our trust totally by even having this conversation right now. The MoDOT man said you had about 60 public meetings about it, and we've already raised $100 million. And now you're going to throw that all out the window just because you're scared to fight for what we actually want. We voted for rail. We want rail in St. Louis. Only rail is going to revitalize St. Louis and be a paradigm shift. Bus rapid transit is not that. Okay. And Mr. Browning, you said BRT is wonderful. You actually prefer it. That is crazy to me. Okay. BRT is not going to change the culture in the city. And if we look at examples of BRT that have Cleveland's Health Line, there's something called BRT creep where it just gets reduced and reduced and reduced. Now that BRT line has less service than a BRT is not a solution. It's pathetic that you guys are even having this discussion and then putting it up there as north-south or BRT, like leaving the option open, like you're actually considering it. No, do not put this up for a vote. We raised $100 million for a north-south rail line. Okay, we don't want BRT. I want you guys to fight for rail. I understand that in the next 3 years, we're not going to get the money from the feds. And living in Missouri, it's going to be hard to get it from the state, but that's why you need to wait 3 years. Use all this public support engagement you're talking about to try to get the BRT thing to pass. Use that for the rail instead. We need to get everyone on St. Louis on board with this because this is a project we need to really make St. Louis thrive again. And I cannot believe that you guys are actually sitting there talking about how you're going to move the funds to BRT. Just wait 3 years, submit the bid then when we have a different administration in DC, and we can try to get the funds then. Don't just give up because you have no spine. Stand up for what we want. We want rail, and we want St. Louis to be better. Kansas City just opened the first of 2 extensions on their very successful streetcar line. So I don't understand how Kansas City can get it done and we can't. And by the way, the line in Kansas City, even when the 2 extensions open, it would still be within city limits of St. Louis. It's not that long. We don't have to wait for the board, like Kara was saying. No, we'll build our portion. Just get what we can done. I mean, that's all I really have to say. I'm just so disappointed, and I cannot believe that I have to do this right now. Take time out of my workday to come testify for this undemocratic move you guys are trying to make. We want rail. Please do not put this on the ballot. Hold off for rail, because that's what St. Louis needs to thrive. Thank you.
Mr. Josiah, could you pronounce your last name for me?
Zimmer.
Thank you.
Thank you for testifying, Mr. Josiah. Anybody else? Madam Clerk?
We have Mr. and Mrs. Alexander online.
All right, Mr. and Miss Alexander, if you could turn your camera on. I don't think we heard you both in. If you can raise your right hand.
Okay, just a minute. Thank you so much. Hi.
Hello, Miss Alexander. Just raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
All right, Miss Alexander, state your first and last name, the ward you reside in, and you have 3 minutes and you can proceed.
Yes, Mrs. Carla Alexander in Ward 11. All right, so we just got a notice about the meeting today, but we couldn't not say anything. So we wanted to come on here and to just make it known that we appreciate the clarity that the voices need to be heard and it needs to go back to a ballot. However, we do know that forcing this bus rapid transit service on the people, it kind of feels the same how the Green Line was forced on residents who were most impacted. It is not a fact that it takes a rail, a train to bring any kind of economic development, increase. There are instances where the rail has worked in cities, but there are thriving cities who did not depend on a rail to bring economic development. What is most pathetic is that voices were ignored when it was presented that the street level light rail would be too close to homes, it would shake up foundations, and it was unsafe. So we wanted to just say, as we go forward, the city must continue to listen to the residents and sincerely take into account that Metro needs to simply enhance the bus services. We do not have the ridership for the rail, for the bus rapid transit at this time. Our request to just make bus services to run along the corridor from Chippewa and Jefferson to Natural Bridge has not occurred yet. So our voices resonated by building up our communities and restoring neighborhoods with infill housing, increasing jobs, repairing our sewer lines, removing the lead from the water service lines. We have so much more, potholes, everything, trash services. We can just keep on going. So we're just asking that all of these concerns be taken into consideration and that the city and Metro and the powers that be listen to the residents, listen to the community, and please not push and force other people's agendas on us when they're not the ones that are being impacted by the services of this transit system. And we can build our communities and still have a nice service, extension, green line, energy saving bus lines that will accommodate the needs of mobility. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody else?
That will be all.
All right, do we have any written testimony on this bill?
Yes, we have 3 in opposition in the Google Drive.
All right. Well, if committee members don't have any more questions on, okay, there's one more question from the Alderwoman from the 7th on this board bill.
This is my very last question. Sorry to make you get back up. I wanted to, it hasn't been addressed yet, and I wanted to just ask, I think Alderman from the 5th did kind of hit at it, but can you talk about when you were bringing this forward, whatever discussions or thoughts you had around why not wait 3 years and re-explore the light rail option, just your thoughts and conversation around?
So the conversations I had with Bi-State in the spring, it's basically how do we preserve North-South Metrolink knowing that we had a mayor that no longer kind of believed in that vision. I was as shocked as anybody else to learn in the media that there was a decision to no longer pursue federal funding for North-South Metrolink. That has been voted on by the Bi-State board. And so there has been a vote to pivot and not continue to pursue North-South Metrolink. That was not a decision that I was involved in or this body was involved in. And so I think we're acting now kind of based upon the hand that's been dealt to us. My preference would have been that we went ahead and submitted to the federal government, and if we were denied, we were denied, but at least they made that decision rather than us making that decision for them.
I guess then maybe Bi-State, do you all, along those lines, what were you all's thoughts or conversations around to wait or not to wait 3 years? Have you already crossed that out as a possibility?
So the problem that we have is that the costs are just too much. We kept looking at it, trying to find a way that was cost effective, but we just couldn't get there. And the tax that supports the project is not enough to support the Metrolink project based on the numbers that we see. And in 3 years, those numbers, with inflation, different things will probably progress and just get bigger. And we don't know if sales tax will keep up with that rate. But currently, it's just more than what we can afford by what the sales tax can support based on the bond deals, based on the, refunding loans. How would we pay for that? The sales tax money is just not enough to pay for that based on what the project is coming in. So that's why there was a shift.
So it's fair to say, just kind of in summary, that the reason why the decision was made to pivot to BRT is because of you all's financial projections of the cost of the project and what that would look like in a few years, and not feeling like that's.
And we continue, we looked at it more than once at how we could do things different effectively to get a project that we could do. But we just couldn't get there. It was $1 billion project.
Okay, thank you both. I just wanted to make sure that was on record for the public.
All right, if there's no more questions, Madam President, you may proceed.
Thank you for all the comments today. Nothing really surprising. I think things that we all knew we needed to get a conversation started on kind of going into this hearing. So I'm glad that we could start that conversation. And I look forward to spending, the next few weeks and months figuring out how we build consensus to get this to a public vote, to get this to a place that we are building consensus and trust with our residents along the way. And working in partnership together. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And with that, we will hold this bill in committee. I will pass the mic over to Alderwoman Sanye, since Vice Chair Browning is not here at the moment, so we can discuss Board Bill 112.
Chairman Aldridge, you are recognized to speak to Board Bill 112.
All right, Madam Clerk, when you get a second, can you read the summary of Board Bill 112?
Board Bill number 112, introduced by Alderman Rasheen Aldrich, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making a supplemental appropriation to the annual budget ordinance 71995 for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026, amounting to the sum of $350,000 and containing an emergency clause.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of the board, I'll keep this brief. I know we have one more committee discussion after this. This is a very simple bill. What this board bill would do is it would appropriate $350,000 from the Equitable Relief Fund to the Utility Tax Fund to be able to help people that are in utility assistance need. That money would go to Heat Up St. Louis, who does amazing work, getting people there, if it's an Ameren or Spire bill, or reconnected literally in the same day. During this tornado, they have exceeded, like many organizations and groups throughout our region, several funds. We're trying to make sure that people can keep their lights and gas on. So there may be a change on the floor. I just want to be transparent. There is a little bit of excess money in this fund of about 490,000 in there to maybe boost up the amount that we're appropriating to be able to get more dollars out the door to people. But if any changes were to be made, since I didn't have the ability to talk to committee members, I didn't want to changes ahead of time. But again, this is appropriating money from one fund to another to help people with their utility assistance. Today I have Mr. Gentry Trotter from Heat Up and also Mr. Dave Sweeney if they want to say any additional words on it, but I think it's pretty straightforward. If not, I'll take any questions from committee members.
Thank you, Alderman. Mr. Trotter, if you'd like to say some words, I'm happy to swear you in.
Did you want to say anything? For you.
Just basically.
If before you get started, if you could just raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah. Basically, like so many of us, this particular contract is existing, and it's for the money was gone in less than 3 months, which was highly unusual. That's because we have a lot of federal employees in this city. We have a lot of people hit by the tornado. We have a lot of people unemployed, and this contract is for citywide, so you can understand. So it put a run on all of us. As you know, we don't charge the city of St. Louis any admin fee. We do this as a public service for them in any city money that's non-federal. So the need is there. It's really scary now because there's more people who need help than money we have. So we're hoping with the money we get from the public and with the money we get from you, which would be a little change because we have an update, that we can use this out the door to help these people with their gas and electric bills so there are no fires because people use unsafe methods of heating. We work, by the way, with the fire department to make sure that people have smoke detectors. We work with them in concert with unsafe methods of heating. We work with the media. So all we're trying to do is educate and advocate. And last but not least, did get a tremendous rate increase from both utilities. And on this particular contract, they went upwards to $750,000 in the past per household as you needed it. Well, those bills are really high, and they're high throughout the city of St. Louis. So that's all we wanted to say, that we're here to help you guys, and the faster we can get the money, the better it is for the people in the community on a first-come, first-served basis. And as you said, sir, we do it in a day's time. They are qualified by certain rules and regulations that are in the contract, but we hope to get it, and we hope to do what we can to keep people from freezing to death this winter.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate all the work you do at Heat Up St. Louis and also Cool Down St. Louis. It's vital that we keep people comfortable in their homes and safe in their homes, especially as the temperatures get to dangerous levels. So know you're doing good work out there. I'll see if you have the committee any questions. We'll start with the only committee member present, Alderwoman Sanye.
Just thank you. I'm very familiar with your work. You do excellent work for our city. Thank you, Alderman, for bringing this forward. And since I'm the only alder person here besides the vice chair, I would just like to make a motion to embank.
Second.
I think Alderwoman Velasquez on the.
I'm still online.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So is that a motion? Do we need a second? I mean, I don't have a problem.
I seconded and made a motion for previous role. Hearing no objection, this is now in bank, meaning every alder on this committee is sponsoring the bill.
Thank you, sir.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Trotter, for being here. Thank you, Alderman, for presenting this bill. And of course, I'll look out for your floor amendment or floor substitute when it makes it to our full board meeting.
And with that, Madam Clerk, do we have any members of the public here to testify?
No, we have none.
Okay. With that, seeing no more questions, Alderman, recognized to close.
All right. I just want to make sure I see Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, who's here, not on the committee, if maybe she wants to say anything.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Not on this committee, but I did not want to miss the opportunity to publicly thank Cool Down, Heat Up, Cool Down, Mr. Gentry Trotter, for the work that he's done, continue to do for decades, but most importantly, as the city continues to go through recovery from the May 16th tornado, the way you all have answered the calls, responded immediately for some of my constituents, still to this day, 7 months later, who are trying to juggle if they had this extra. They don't want to get behind, but they need a window, or still, unfortunately, a tarp, or still things that they've been able to fill in the gaps the way that only Heat Up St. Louis can. So again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me these few seconds to publicly thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do, and know that you will have my full support in whatever position and whatever we need to continue to help the people the way you do.
Well said, Alderwoman. Alderman?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I just want to thank the members of this committee within Banked, as the Alderman from the 9th mentioned. That means every member that sits on this committee is now signed on as a co-sponsor on top of President Green and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, who was a co-sponsor before this. You know, Heat Up, Cool Down St. Louis do tremendous work. I've had the opportunity to volunteer with them for 2 years and be able to see firsthand the work that they do. There's a lot of organizations that's doing good work, and I want to thank them all. But I want to give some additional flowers to Heat Up St. Louis. I've seen how, you know, people have called in panic that their light bill, or that literally Ameren was standing at the door to disconnect them, and we have been able, and we, the volunteers and the staff, but mainly the pioneer, Mr. Trotter, have been able to get people turned on literally within minutes. Their turnaround time is literally within that same day, especially as we are, you know, post-tornado. There's so much need out there. And, you know, there's always more that we could be doing from the city of St. Louis, from the Board of Aldermen. And I think this is just another step forward from government to try to support one of many needs that is needed in this impacted area, but also, just to be clear, across our region. As we know, Ameren bills, I don't know if y'all haven't seen y'all Ameren bill recently, but, you know, they continue to go up, and they're getting higher and higher. So to have an organization that partners with the city of St. Louis so closely and directly is extremely needed in this time and beyond this time. So I just want to thank you all for the support. And with that, I'll ask for a do pass recommendation on Board Bill 112.
Thank you. At this time, I'll accept a do pass recommendation for Board Bill 112.
I make a motion that we pass Board Bill 112 with the do pass recommendation.
Second.
Moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th. Call for previous roll from the Alderman from the 14th. Hearing no objection, this bill has been passed out of committee. Turning it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, next will be our discussion item, and the last item of the day for item number 6. We didn't have any resolutions for review, so we'll go to item number 6, which is committee discussion. And discussion item number 1 is Kwame Building Group. So if the representatives from Kwame Building Group will come up, we are pulling up that presentation so that you guys can present to the Budget Committee. And I just want to give a little bit of a highlight. The reason we're having Kwame Budget Group present, I think they're going to be talking about things that relate to tornado. And this committee is a committee that meets monthly to talk about contracts and funds on a monthly basis when it comes to what is going on with the recovery dollars. I always give him his flowers during the discussion of the tornado recovery bill that myself and President Green sponsored. Alderman Browning brought a very good add-on to have monthly conversations with ENA, the President Board of Aldermen, the Comptroller, and the Mayor's Office, and the Recovery Office, that which came out of that, to continue to get details and information on how we're spending those dollars, so that we make sure we're getting all the dollars out the door, but also being accountable and responsible for not just passing the legislation, but making sure that we follow those dollars every step of the way to support folks that have been impacted by this tornado. All right, we got the presentation queued up, so just state your first, last name, the organization that you're with. Is there, and I think the computer's up there where they can change the slide themselves, correct, Madam Clerk? Okay, so you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Michael Thompson. I'm the Business Development and Marketing Director for Kwame Building Group.
Patrick McRoy, Project Executive.
Lamar Wilkes, Project Manager.
Hello, committee. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. First off, I just wanted to say Kwame Building Group, we are a construction management firm that specializes in peer agency/owners representation type services. So we are been in business for about 33 years now, working in the city of St. Louis, just helping with numerous construction management projects. We were the program managers of the Convention Center, the new MLS STL City SC Soccer Stadium, and as well as working out at Lampert Airport for a number of projects such as the airport renovation, the Terminal 1, Terminal 2, and are now the joint venture program managers along with WSP for the upcoming terminal consolidation program. So after the May 16th tornado, Kwame made an effort to immediately that following week on May 19th, go out and assess the damages that was going on to help the community in the area. By May 21st, later on that week, we launched the Kwame Relief Effort, which brought together through our philanthropy wing, the Kwame Charitable Foundation, us, along with other community members that came together to help us assist the residents in a targeted area that we thought was not getting enough attention from resources throughout the city, whether that was from the city itself or numerous programs and organizations that had stationed themselves in areas that were miles away from this particular area. And so from May 21st through June 13th, we were out there for 3 weeks assisting the residents in this area, providing them with toiletry items, hygienic products, food, and what else they might needed, resources, lists of places that they can get services from, just to assist with them while not having any other assistance through the government or any other aid. A few weeks later, the city of St. Louis issued a proposal for program management services to assist with the restabilization and modernization of the homes damaged by this tornado. So we submitted a proposal for this effort, and by June 20th, we gave a presentation to the city to solicit our services and show that we were the right program managers for this opportunity, because we saw firsthand the residents in the area that were affected and all the help that they needed. So we thought this was not only important to us, but important for us to be a part of it so that we could assist the residents that we were helping firsthand. And so by June 25th, after our presentation, we waited to hear from the city of St. Louis. And it wasn't until August 26th that we signed a contract with the city in order to perform these services for the city and the residents. And from there, we enacted, and I can let Patrick and Lamar speak more about what we're working on right now.
Thank you. Thank you again for your time. So as Michael said, then after we were selected, our scope of work that we were selected for was to help hire and general contractors that would be performing the stabilization work.
I know you're a tall man. If you can, get up on the mic just a little more, so we could you could take it off. You could, if you need.
Take it off?
Yeah, you could take the mic off. We just want to make sure people that's watching on YouTube can hear the work that you guys doing.
How's that?
That works?
Okay, thanks. So anyway, going back to the scope of work that we were awarded to do was to hire and then oversee the general contractors that would be performing the stabilization work, take the database that the city collected throughout the summer and compile all that data that they provided and fall through and recontact every single resident that was on there. And then to ensure that we gave everybody due diligence to file a claim or state their need for help, we had to call each person at least 3 times if they didn't answer the first or second time, and then they needed to be on 3 separate days. And then to ensure that we were asking the same information, we had a city-approved call log or intake questionnaire, and so every single person was asked the exact same question. After that, all that information was kind of organized and cataloged and then managed within the STL City Permits website, which I believe the mayor's office and W Blue worked together to develop. You can see some screenshots from there. So the red, yellow, and green were the zones or the target zones for all the folks that need help. And then there's kind of the neighborhood breakdown that was in each zone. So then after we did all the intake information, then we reviewed and authorized the general contractor's work. So they kind of came behind us, put some information in there, and then we reviewed that. And then we were out in the field along with the general contractors doing some on-site inspection to make sure the work was progressing, make sure they're doing it safe, make sure they're doing a quality job. And then, of course, just reviewing general contractors' pay applications, making sure they're accurate, conducting weekly meetings with general contractors and with the city team. And then last but not least, we managed the materials warehouse. We were able to use the Monarch warehouse on MLK, and we had a person in there working about 4 hours a day, inventorying lumber and tarps and everything that came in and out for the project.
I'm not that tall. Thank you all for having us as well. As Patrick and Michael mentioned, our program hit the ground running immediately after the tornado. At this current moment, we are still and open willingly in the field day to day, Monday through Friday, completing tarping and boarding for the remainder, I want to say 100+ residents that we are still intaking. A little backtracking, we had 12 employees from the day after the tornado to around August, making about 5,000 calls reaching out to 5,000 individuals who were affected by the tornado at around 15,000 total calls. After those 5,000 residents were reached out to, 3,000 were qualified based on phone interviews, which then led to in-person intakes. After the phone calls were made, around 574 work orders were created, or draft scopes of work, which included the GCs going out to individual homes, taking pictures of potential scopes of work, i.e. tarps and boarding, whether they needed structural repairs or anything of that nature, just to gauge and record the damages that were done to each individual parcel. Out of that 574, 314 were deemed too damaged, whether it be structural integrity, structural damage was too intense, walls were moving, roofs were completely caved in, houses were almost completely destroyed. To date, at the completion of this presentation, we had 106 houses completed with upwards of 100 still in the process of being completed and intakes being completed. The 4 general contractors that we decided to go with out of the original 10 and 7 that were interviewed were Dream Builders for Equity, Construction Management Resources, Veterans, Elite, and KAI Building. Those are just some of the logos. We'll go individually by the work that each one has done. The pictures are real life examples of what the work that they have completed before and after. Dream Builders specifically was assigned to 131 homes. 94 were deemed too damaged to tarp or board, and with that, they completed around 37, like I said, at the date of this completed presentation. CRM was assigned a total of 101 homes, with almost 70 being too damaged to board, and with the exact amount of 29 homes to repair. They have been actively willing to extend out and go above and beyond this original scope of work that we gave them. Like I mentioned, we're still open and willing and still taking intake. So our program is not over and it hasn't been completed, like I said, when we made this presentation. So these numbers will fluctuate if we do ever get an opportunity to present this work again. Veterans Elite, as I mentioned, they have 142 total homes. Almost 90 were deemed too damaged to tarp or board, which left 53 homes to repair. They have also too been more than willing and motivated to continue this work, whether it be a continuance of the tarps and board, or whether we decide to extend the scope of work out into structural repair, debris removal, just anything of the nature. KAI was our fourth general contractor that we contracted with. They were assigned 132 total homes, 81 deemed too damaged to tarp and board, and completed 32 home repairs. The recovery office optimization. So in October, Tetra Tech was brought on as a partner company to centralize systems for the recovery office programs, whether that be debris and demolition, emergency stabilization, and the future home repair task of work that we hope to get to in the near future. Additional scopes to date, we have around 100. Like I said, these numbers aren't 100% accurate. To date, we have around 100 additional homes pending intakes and that are still in the process of being repaired. As I mentioned, the program is not over, and we see no close to it anytime soon. Whether we decide to extend out the current scopes of work that we have or escalate to home repairs and further stabilization. With that being said, that was the conclusion of our general presentation. And do you have any questions?
I will go in order of seniority, starting with my Vice Chair, Michael Browning.
Thank you. I don't really have any questions. It's just nice to hear an update about the work you're doing, and appreciate you coming before us to share some of that. This is certainly a difficult situation for our city, and everyone who steps up and gets to work just to clear, one property or, one area, just every little bit makes a difference for that person who's helped. And so I know that we're all pulling together here to get this done.
Alderwoman Sanye.
I would echo just the gratitude and appreciation for you all's work. I am curious, this is the Budget Committee. How has you all's relationship and work been with the city?
On this specific project or overall?
On this specific project, I would definitely love to talk to you all. We're talking about some MBWE stuff as well right now, so I would love to have a sidebar conversation, but to stay on topic for budget, I'm specifically talking about in regards to your tornado recovery effort work.
Yeah, I think our experience with the city has been great. They've met us every time we've had a question. They answer emails. We've had meetings out in the field, and we've had meetings at our office. And I think it's a good relationship that we forged with the team.
Is there anything that we can do to be helpful to you all?
No, just just more community engagement with who needs help. Bringing Tetra Tech in October when the city got them on board. Now, as Lamar was kind of alluding to, now we're getting some additional. So people that maybe did not know there was a program during the summer when it was on the news and in the newspaper, but obviously some people missed that. So now we're getting maybe 25 to 30 additional people to contact maybe a week or so, and maybe half of those folks qualify for this program. So just continuing to let people know there's support out there would be helpful, and we'll continue to help everybody that qualifies.
Okay, that concludes my questions. Thank you again for your all's work.
No problem. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for letting me crash the budget party. Similar to what I said to Heat Up St. Louis, I just want to publicly express my gratitude for the work that you all are doing. And so hearing from my constituents, just want to know, to echo Alderwoman Sanye's question, is there anything that us in our positions can do? Let me kind of caveat and also say that that's about the narrative. So I know that in your presentations today, you shared that Kwame is not actually doing the work, more like a general contractor. And so and I know from lived experience that when there has been any kind of challenge or hiccup with another contract, you all have immediately responded and immediately got to the constituents' request. We also know that going into 7 months, the level of frustration is a lot of times misdirected. But if you wake up and go to sleep with this as your life and what you're trying to do to get to the next step every day, this is the level of frustration that you'll have. So in that narrative and in us being able to help you, can you just briefly walk through what is the experience, the recipient of the work that you all are doing? Do they talk to you all directly? Do they call the office first and then they talk to you? Because what'll happen is somebody will be watching this and they'll see they'll see the work, they'll see that, and they'll think they can maybe just call Kwame, or call us. So I want to make sure that in us being very transparent this way and sharing this information, that we also share it correctly and also the access to it correctly as well.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Yeah, people have contacted us directly. They have our main switchboard number, and whoever answers the phone knows to put them in touch with somebody on the project team so they can potentially get added to the intake list. We also worked with our partners at the city to develop a little QR code flyer, I guess it would be, that we can hand out in the field if residents, say adjacent to whoever we're working with, need assistance. They can scan the QR code, which will take them to the permits website, and we can get them intaked into the system.
Yes. And thank you for being here. I see we do have representation from the STL Recovery Office, but just for clarity, for that intake system, in order to receive the help from resources from the program that you all GC, you have to already be in the programming through the STL Recovery. You have to already have gone through that process first, or they can come straight to you all.
No, they can come straight to us. So
Okay.
originally, the city collected all the data and kind of dumped it into a database that we went through, but we're still actively intaking new people. Tetra Tech is doing that from a program standpoint directly for the city. And then, yes, if somebody calls Kwame directly, we get them into the system, make that phone call, add their information, go over the questionnaire, and then potentially give them help if they qualify.
Thank you so much. Again, because those little nuances are what's getting people frustrated to just say, forget it. So thank you that they can just call you directly, that they know. First of all, everybody knows the word, the reputation behind Kwame. So that's a trusted voice in the city of St. Louis. So having you all be that go-between has absolutely made the difference. And again, I just want to echo the gratitude and say if there's anything that I can do in a position that I sit in to help you all in this work and to help you all get to the constituents that I know need it the most, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and you always invited to our budget party. Always. I just echo everything, from my colleagues. I think one of the questions that I had that Alderwoman Sanier asked was, are there any challenges? I think one of the things is Budget Committee is trying to do is work hand in hand with the Office of Recovery and the other departments as money is getting out the door to make sure that, as Alderwoman Clark Hubbard said, if it's anything we can do from the legislative side, how do we make sure that those services and money get to the boots on the ground, to the people that, need it the most. So it sounds like things are flowing pretty well. As Alderwoman Clark Hubbard said, appreciate Kwame Group. It's a well-known group that has done a lot of great work in the city, and to have a gentleman like you and others and women, I'm sure that's part of the team, helping the most vulnerable. We really do appreciate it. And if there's any time that you guys want to come back in front of the Budget Committee to just, keep folks updated on what's going on, what support is needed, you always have an open invitation here at the Board of Aldermen. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Appreciate you. All righty. Outside of Board Bill 1. Outside of Board Bill 106, were there any additional written testimony?
I have none.
Any announcements from members? And everybody was present today. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor, aye? Opposed? Motion carries.